Hang on a minute. Okay, now I'm going to record. You're good to go.
Good evening and welcome to our Parent Community Information Session. Thank you for joining us. My name is Dan Bowles, Superintendent of Schools. Also here for our discussion are Dr. Christopher Leahy, Associate Superintendent for Teaching and Learning, Don Keegan, Assistant Superintendent for Business, Maintenance and Operation, Transportation and Food Service, Greg Sohn, Director of Elementary Education and ELA and Math, Lisa Goldberg, Director of Social Emotional Learning, and Jamie Sullivan, Interim Executive Principal at CNS High School. Our goal is to answer questions that people have regarding the reopening of schools. This is our last of 3 information sessions that we will be conducting. All of the questions and answers will be recorded and posted to our website so that people can obtain the information if they were unable to tune into this session. The format will be as follows. We have asked people to send in their questions in advance to a Google link that was blasted out. The purpose of this was to ensure we are providing thorough responses to your questions. I've assembled the people who oversee the particular areas in order to properly respond to the questions that have been asked. There were 4 major areas that were solicited for questions. The first being health and safety, the second being instruction, the third being transportation, and the fourth was social emotional learning. So the first question that I'm going to ask is, for new students moving from elementary to middle school, will there be a locker night or other opportunity for the kids to visit the school and locate their new classroom prior to the first day? Dr. Leahy?
Yeah, that's a great question, Mr. Bowles. And we've had some parents asking that. You know, traditionally we do offer that, and we know it's important for our students to get acclimated with our schools before they start. So right now we are looking at opportunities for students to get into those schools before school starts. I mean, we do have a little more time now that school is pushed back to September 10th. So what we're looking at in the middle schools is our building principals, Mr. Cordova, Ms. Carducci will be sending out something to parents about an opportunity to come in, take a look at the school, have a locker night to get acclimated. The junior high will be offering something similar. They're also doing tours by appointment. If parents want a tour, they are offering tours by appointment, and they're going to be offering some opportunities there as well for parents to get into the building ahead of time. And I know that Ms. Sullivan and the CNS staff have a night, I believe, next week coming up for the sophomores to get into the building and take a walk around. As a father of a sophomore head to CNS, I know he's pretty excited to get in there and take a look around for the building. So we will have opportunities for those students making those transitions to the middle school, to the junior high, and CNS.
Thank you. The next question, shouldn't students be screened before they even get on the bus and before they arrive at school? Mr. Keegan.
Well, the guidance says that parents should be evaluating their children before they send them off to school. Ideally, we would screen children prior to boarding a district bus. However, after a lot of thought, we are concerned that rejecting students at the bus stop would be both traumatic for the students and potentially dangerous if the parents were not home to receive that student. Please keep in mind, though, that students will be wearing a mask at all times during their transportation and that they'll be seated on the bus alone.
Thank you, Mr. Keegan.
And I should just add, Dan, that they will be screened immediately upon arrival at school.
Thank you very much. The next question, what are the elementary grading expectations and how will report cards work if schools transition to all online learning? Mr. Stone?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Bowles. And that's a really good question and something that we had to grapple with early on in the planning. So the biggest challenge we had to overcome was how are we going to have a grading and reporting system given the fact that we could be in one of any 3 models. We could have been in a full face-to-face regular school model. We could be in a hybrid model like the one that we've adopted, or we also have our remote learners, and we could actually transition to all in remote at some point. We all know that there's really those 3 areas that can happen at any point during the school year. So we had to build something that was flexible enough to accommodate that, but also have the accountability that's needed. And most importantly, beyond accountability, is the whole purpose of a report card and a reporting tool is to inform our parents how their children are doing in school, how they're performing against the standards, and how they're learning, so that parents have a good perception of how each child is doing. So, so what we landed with after a lot of discussion, and there was a committee that worked on this, we really kind of landed back with keeping our original report card and making some adaptations to that. But we're going to be using our typical trimester report card. So that'll come out in the typical trimester dates, which will be shared by your buildings. It'll be publicized at all of your buildings. And so those will go out on a regular basis. And as far as grading and everything else, the expectation is that students will be, for the hybrid model, they'll be in-class learning, and they'll have, as we've talked about, the asynchronous assignments also. So that online component that supplements what has been taught. And we will be assessing throughout this process against each of the standards. Now, one of the biggest challenges is going to be that we've got a large amount of standards that need to be covered. And so we've left the report card as it stands with all of the standards. So you can see what's typically expected in first grade or third grade or whichever grade. But teachers will be adapting that based on what is actually covered. And we will be prioritizing content as much as possible to ensure students are getting full access to the curriculum in a prioritized manner. We know that we're going to have to adapt some things, and I'll talk more about that a little bit later. So on that report card, you may see some NAs, meaning not assessed. So certain standards may not be assessed in a regular time. They might be moved to another trimester. So that will fluctuate a little bit. Two last points I want to make. So students that are not engaging with the online activities or the expectations of the class, their grade will be recorded as such. So if a student isn't participating, is not completing work, is the teacher's unable to make contact or unable to provide feedback because that student is not engaged, the grade would reflect that on the report card, and teachers would put in there the rationale behind that. So for example, if a first grade student was making minimal progress on the standard because we didn't have much evidence of learning because that child wasn't participating for various reasons, that would be reported accurately. And that's our job on a report card, is to report accurately how each student is doing. And lastly, I will just talk special areas will also will be part of that system as we typically are, and they will be reporting in the first trimester and third trimester, which is standard practice for our district over the last couple of years.
Thank you, Mr. Stone. The next question is, what is the district doing about digital citizenship? Mrs. Goldberg?
Thanks for that question, Mr. Bowles. As we know, many of us live much of our lives online, increasingly so in this era of COVID. And just as in regular life, when there are norms of how we should behave online. Our instructional technology coaches have engaged in and will continue to engage in educating our students, our staff, and our families about how to conduct ourselves online. Increasingly, we hear anecdotes about students who have posted things on social media that then come back to haunt them when they apply to college or to a job. So it's really important to teach our students early and in an ongoing way about how to interact with the world while online. And if we are thinking about social and emotional learning as the way we treat each other, it stands to reason that those kinds of expectations about how we interact with each other need to follow us into the online world.
Thank you. The next question, can students go to in-person BOCES program and remote learning at CNS High School? Mrs. Sullivan?
Thanks, Mr. Bowles. You know, we've been asked that question a lot from parents and students. You know, we really value the BOCES program, and it has a lot of great things to offer. So we are allowing our students who are attending AM or PM BOCES or New Visions to attend those BOCES program and then choose to do the CNS learning remotely. So we are going to allow it. You just choose that on the CNS, or I'm sorry, on the district website, just to let us know, and we'll take care of the rest.
Okay. Thank you. Next question, are teachers allowed to have fans on or can teachers have class outside? Mr. Keegan.
Sure, we would encourage that. We're available to facilitate the movement of fresh outside air. Fans are going to be allowed and certainly encouraged. And as long as the good weather lasts, we're going to try to have PE and recess outside, again, weather permitting.
Okay, great. Thank you, Mr. Keegan. The next question, will our children learning remotely have the option to complete the entire year this way, or if things change, will they be required to return to classroom instruction? Mr. Leahy?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I know what a lot of parents are looking for is a predictable structure and schedule for the school year. And we want to provide that for our students. At this time, as Mr. Stone alluded to, we're looking at complete face-to-face instruction as an option, complete remote instruction, and hybrid models, which we'll be starting our year with. And right now, we're placing students in those situations, in those different models, with the intention of leaving them throughout the school year. We don't want to create more change than we need to. We want our students to develop relationships with their teachers and staffs, as well as their staff members in the building, their classmates and peers. We think that's really important, and we don't want a lot of changes within the system because we know those relationships need to take time to develop, and they're an important part of the school year for our students. If we were to get a mandate saying that we have to bring everyone back to school at a certain time, then obviously we'd do that. But if a parent's signing their child up for remote instruction at this point, the best answer would be, yeah, that would be provided throughout the year, unless there was something that forced us to take that option away. And what's important to know there is we'd be communicating that with parents in advance, if that's where we were. At this time, though, the expectation is we will continue throughout the school year, providing that opportunity for parents, because we know how hard it is to change schedule and to provide childcare, and we want to keep that routine stable.
Thank you, Dr. Leahy. Next question, how does the district intend to assist children in mentally preparing to transition from in-class to remote learning throughout the week? Mr. Stone?
Yeah, that's a good question. I know it's been brought up a few times in the past and we've talked about that, but it's an important one to walk through again. I think there's a lot of questions of, how are we going to support certainly our youngest students with all of this, but not only our youngest, but all of our students. And Mrs. Goldberg will speak to that, I'm sure, and she has, spoken about, some of the things we do, and a big part of that is developing relationships, and that really comes naturally for our teachers. And we need to remember that is what social emotional is. It's about forming those relationships, and so that's a big part of this. And so at the elementary level, that is going to be a priority, as I've spoken to a few times, and it's important to keep pointing out that's going to be a priority for all of our teachers. In the entire district, but certainly at the elementary level, when those students walk in the door, meeting and greeting them, knowing by name, getting to know each of our students, getting to know their interests, their likes and dislikes. We can apply that to everything we do. And that's what teachers do on a daily basis, but more so now than ever. But I like to point out that it's not just a standalone. We don't do that in isolation. That's part of what we do. But to talk about how we transition between those two models of, when students are actually in class learning face to face, and then all of a sudden they're now home for a couple of days doing remote learning. The way we're going to help bridge that is really to help prepare our students, and especially with that technology component. Our kindergarten through first or second grade students, they're going to need a lot of extra time just learning how to navigate the Chromebook itself. When you think about a kindergartner, a 5-year-old, teaching them, they've never used a trackpad before. They're often used to touch screens, and we have a lot of touch screens. Some of our technology is trackpads too, so they need to be able to do both. We're going to teach them how to do that in those first couple of weeks of school. We're going to teach our students in K4 how to navigate the websites, how to post assignments, how to watch videos, what those online expectations are for Google Classroom. We're going to have a uniform platform at the elementary level that will allow easier access for parents and families and our students. So there's a little bit more consistency there. I know that was a major concern in the spring that we're trying to address our needs. So a lot of that's going to come to the training of students. There's also going to be a lot of information going home to parents. There'll be time in all of our teachers' schedules to have office hours where there's interactive time. So the teachers are available to take questions, answer family questions, answer about instruction, or get them connected to someone who can help them with technology. We're gonna have a lot of resources available in different ways because we're doing school completely differently. So I think it's a combination of all of those factors. It's our teaching of our students, building those relationships, having the resources needed in our district to support our families, and most importantly, having really good two-way communication from home and at school so that we're responding in a timely manner and getting to the needs of the community. We've got a lot of different needs out there. This is a difficult, challenging situation for all, but rest assured, we're committed to helping our families through all this and certainly making sure school is a positive experience for our students.
Thank you, Mr. Stone. The next question, what is the district doing about students and families who have experienced trauma? Mrs.
Thanks
Goldberg?
for asking that. Yes, thanks for asking that, Mr. Bowles. Earlier, Mr. Keegan talked about students being asked to step off the bus as being traumatic. And often today we hear a lot about trauma and what trauma is. And by definition, it's having a deeply distressing or disturbing experience. And each of us experiences things in lots of different ways. There are some students who have been very traumatized by the social isolation that has been a result of COVID. And there are others who have been seemingly unfazed. And so because of this, our district is really taking a trauma-sensitive approach. What does that mean? That means designing classroom environments that are welcoming, that are inclusive, and that give children a sense of belonging. This summer, we offered several sessions of training called Creating Safety, Connection, and Assurance in the Classroom. And in these sessions, our staff learned what are some ways of, first of all, understanding what trauma is, and then what are some ways for creating environments that support students of all needs. Trauma-sensitive practices are good for everybody. They are practices in which we feel connected and safe physically and emotionally. And that learning that started this summer, actually, we've been working on trauma-sensitive approach to learning for a couple of years now, but the learning will continue for both our staff and our students.
Thank you. Next question, if one child's class is quarantined due to a positive case, would a sibling in the same school have to quarantine as well? Mr. Keegan?
So in that case, the answer is no, not necessarily. Only those persons that have 10 minutes of direct contact with a confirmed case or have a confirmed case themselves will be required to quarantine for 14 days. Secondhand exposure does not require quarantining.
Okay. Thank you. Our next question. On the one day students do go to school, will students be in one room for all 4 blocks and each teacher comes to that classroom, or will students be changing classrooms for all 4 blocks? And this is for Mr. Leahy.
Yeah, that's a great question. And I assume that parent's referring to the junior high school and the high school where students will be attending one day a week so we can meet our social distancing guidelines and maintain our cleaning protocols. So for those students, what's unique about when you get to 8th through 12th grade is you've got quite a few electives and very few student schedules are exactly the same. And you may have a student taking facts while the student next to him might be taking art or a business class. The scheduling becomes much more complex. So to keep all those students in the same class, we wouldn't be able to provide those electives and some of those opportunities kids need to graduate as well as to move forward to college. So our original thought was, and Ms. Sullivan and Ms. Strauss worked on this, is to try to do an 8-period schedule and get the kids to see all those teachers in one day. But given that we have a requirement to clean those spaces between students, there's no way we could do that and manage 8 periods in one day and get the kids in and out. So what we've done is we kind of, we have to meet our social distancing guidelines. We want to make sure our schools are healthy and safe places. So instead of trying to run an 8-period schedule, we're going to run a 4-block schedule. And the students on week 1 will go through their 4-block schedule and they will move classes. And what we're going to have to do is identify zones in our buildings where we'll start the day in one part of the building, move students out of those classrooms, clean them, and then move them back into those classrooms. The second week, students would have the second 4 blocks, 5 through 8, and they would see those teachers. Now, when they see those teachers, of course, they're still going to be getting instruction online on days they're not in school, but we will not be doing the full 8 periods in one day. We're going to be doing 4 blocks, cleaning between use of those classrooms, and students will be moving throughout the day. The other challenges we have throughout the school day, especially in our larger buildings, is the use of cafeteria, making sure that we're social distancing and cleaning between uses, as well as regulating the flow of traffic from the hallways, restrooms, as well as getting in and out of the building. So those are some of the challenges we're looking at, and I think we've got some real good solutions to those challenges. But yes, so to back to the question was, will they be changing? Yes, students will be changing, but we've minimized the amount of change throughout the day. We're having a 4-block day that'll allow us to meet those social distancing guidelines and make sure that the spaces are cleaned appropriately.
Thank you. The next question is, how will my child know about all the new procedures and expectations at school? Mr. Stone?
Sure. So again, we tried to build a system that's age appropriate, and we've done that in multiple different ways. So starting at the elementary level, the elementary principal has actually just finished filming a video to go out to our elementary students that's going to talk about, the 5 of the major components. They're going to talk about the school bus, what that's going to look like, temperatures, what that looks like, face masks, and a few other areas. But what's nice about it is we were able to bring some students in. The elementary principals will each go over kind of what the expectations, what it's going to look like. We're going to do it in a child-friendly way. And then we have some students as examples there. So I think that'll be a nice way for our younger students to actually visually watch that and see it, as well as parents to get some of that information in an appropriate manner. Beyond that, the elementaries will also be sending home additional information with detailed guidance and expectations to all families. That'll go out in our traditional manners in newsletters, as well as publicized documents. As far as the secondary goes, I know that they're going to be doing similar. They're going to be putting out all of this information through their regular channels and posting it in their various places on their websites, newsletters, and publicizing it with their students. And again, I think an important part will also be when students come in school, we'll be going over all these things. It's new and different, and that's what we do as teachers, and we'll adapt. But we're building different systems at different levels, and all of that will be forthcoming over the next week or so.
Okay, great. Thank you. Will the junior high and high school have building tours before school starts? Mrs. Sullivan?
Yes, the junior high is doing building tours next week by appointment. What parents can do is they can call the junior high main office at 315-218-3600. The number again is 315-218-3600. Their tours will be Monday through Friday next week, and students are also encouraged at that time to pick up their Chromebook. Now at CNS, we'll be doing tours. We will be doing walkthroughs for sophomores and new students only. They can come into the building on Monday, August 31st from 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. to walk through the building, follow their schedule. We're asking that sophomores only come in with one other individual. In both instances, in both schools, everyone must wear a mask and follow proper social distancing procedures. At the high school, the sophomores and new students can pick up their Chromebooks on August 31st as well. Again, during the same hours between 10 and 6.
Thank you. Next question. If masks are required, but no student will be denied bus admission, who will be monitoring the enforcement of masks on the bus? Mr. Keegan?
So the bus driver is going to have an ample supply of extra masks on hand for any students that don't have a mask or try to get on the bus without a mask. And the bus driver will make sure the child understands that it's mandatory to wear the mask to be transported to school.
Okay, thank you. Next question. If I choose to bring my child to and from school to avoid another place of contact, will they still have a seat on the bus if it was needed for an extenuating circumstances? Mr. Keegan, can you answer that question as well?
Yes, of course. We will certainly accommodate that situation. However, we're asking parents who know that they will not require transportation during the first semester to notify the North Syracuse Transportation Department via the hotline, which began yesterday. The hotline number is 315-218-2035. Again, the hotline number is 315-218-2035. The hotline can answer any questions that anybody has regarding transportation, but in particular, if a parent is deciding not to use transportation during the semester, please let us know. Those that are going to be driving their kids but may need transportation, we'll keep you on the list and certainly welcome your child on the bus on an as-needed basis. At drop-off, parents, just to talk a little bit about the drop-off for a minute, if you are driving your child to school, we're going to request that you stay in your car with your child until we have done temperature screening and cleared that child. This way, if the child does have a temperature of 100 or greater, 100 degrees or greater, we can let you know that right away, and you could take your child home. And that's going to be our approach for parent drop-off. For pickup, we're going to ask that the parents prepare to pick up their children outside of school. And we're trying to limit the number of contacts inside of school, and therefore we're going to work to verify the parent's identity and match them up with their children outside of school, so that we don't have parents inside school during COVID-19.
Thank you. Why do grades 5 through 12 need to wait twice as long to return if choosing remote? I am a school teacher myself in another district, and I have a son starting 5th grade who has several conditions. This is a lot of change. I feel December 7th, K4 is very reasonable. Something should be done about this. Dr. Leahy?
Yeah, that's a great question. And the answer to that is that we have two different reporting systems here. For K through 4, they're on a trimester schedule. It ends December 4th. Next Monday would be December 7th, would be the start of the second trimester. And we would want our students to work through that first trimester for a couple of reasons. As I mentioned earlier, it's important to maintain those relationships. It's also important to have stable staffing, because as we move students around, we could create disproportionate class sizes, or they could be unbalanced. And we want to be able to do that. We also want to give our teachers an opportunity to build those relationships with students, see that academic progress. We know it's going to be what we call a soft start to the school year. It's going to take a little bit of time to get students in the buildings, get those routines and procedures down, welcome our students, foster some really strong, healthy relationships. And particularly that, the fact that students haven't been in school for almost 6 months when they do arrive in September, we're going to take a little bit of time getting started, but we want to be able to go through the first trimester minimally for our K through 4 students, say, hey, let's make sure that we've looked at these options that we have available. And for our secondary students, they're on a different reporting schedule. So they're on a quarterly reporting schedule, and the first semester ends at the end of January. And if we were to do the first quarter, we'd be making some changes really early in the school year. And we want to be able to wait until the end of the first semester for those students, again, for the same reasons. We have courses that are taught throughout the semester, half-year courses, that is. We want to make sure that we're not moving students around, and we want to be able to maintain and ensure that all students have a certified teacher. But we may have some challenges if we were to move students around constantly. We are a very large district, and we're talking about thousands of students at our secondary schools. That can become very difficult to maintain the quality of education we want to provide, to ensure that we're going to have a certified teacher, and also make sure that our students are progressing through the school year in a very unique school year, building those relationships, those connections, getting that routine down. So we want to kind of get the school year started, settle things down. Now, of course, if parents have a unique circumstance, if there's a health condition, if there's something changing at home, our building principals will work with you on that, to make changes if they're absolutely necessary. But we also want to make sure that parents understand that we want our kids to get into the school year, to settle in, to build those relationships. And if there is a concern, and I had a wonderful a parent that I talked to just on Friday about some challenges she was going through in terms of looking at the way students are assigned throughout the week. And she said, I'm an essential worker, I'm a nurse, and I can't be home the nights that my children will be home, or the days my children will be home, based on the system. And I've already communicated with those building principals. They are reaching out to her to try to make those adjustments where we can, because we understand this is a challenging situation for everyone. Parents are having a difficult time finding childcare. Parents are having a difficult time supporting students if they're not available at those hours. We want to make sure that we can do our best to create a tenable situation for our students. Hopefully we can, maximize the contact time with teachers. And we want to have those conversations with parents. And I think that over the last few weeks, we've had some really great conversations. We're listening. At the same time, we want to move forward in a big district. We want to keep those schedules static and stable. We want to get kids moving forward. So the short answer would be, the reason we're doing this is because we have two different reporting systems, the trimester for the K-4 students, the semester would be for our secondary students. But if there's ever a challenge or a real health concern or a hardship, we want to hear from our parents, and we'll work within the system to support you and your family.
Thank you. Next question. All children are at different levels with reading, math, etc. What steps will be taken to ensure my child will receive instruction for their level of learning? Mr. Stone?
Yeah, I think that question gets to the heart of what we do as teachers. Every single student who comes in every single year, we are constantly assessing in multiple different ways. And when I say assessment, I don't mean a paper pencil test necessarily. Obviously, that's a part of assessment, but a big part of assessment is through the relationship building, getting to know students, through the day-to-day interaction, whether you're a 10th grade English teacher or you're a first grade teacher. It's about getting to know students and constantly figuring out exactly where they are. Now, this year is going to offer some really big challenges, we know. We know that in the spring, shifting our entire system to an online system was an enormous task for everyone, and certainly we've learned a lot from there. But we also know there's going to be learning gaps for students, and I've probably spoken about this a few times, but obviously it's on everyone's mind. We know students coming in, we always have what we call the summer slide. So there's always this time in the summer of a couple months when most students, especially in the lower grades, the K-6, are going to kind of have a little bit of a regression. And so compounding that with that learning loss that they're probably going to have from the spring, we know students coming in are going to have some loss of learning. So the way we're going to address that is obviously one of the things we do every year, and all districts do, is what's called universal screening. So all students will go through an academic screener. And basically what that is, it's an online assessment tool that we use to determine where some of those gaps are. Now, we do not believe that any type of tool is going to give us the answer to everything. That's one component of data. The other things we look at are multiple different measures. So we used to be able to have some state testing data, which we don't have this year. So teachers are going to be doing a lot of what's called common assessments, or assessments that are created locally. So we can pre-assess our students when they come in the door. We can start getting some data on them. But I think I really want to point out, as we've stressed all along, academics are, of course, a core part of what we do, but those relationships are going to come first. And so the priority will be on relationships. And then, of course, we're going to have to start doing some of those assessments. And that's going to happen in multiple different ways in all of our classrooms. From there, our teachers are going to do what they do best. It's kind of that art and science of teaching. The art of teaching is that piece of listening to our students, taking in where they are with their learning, adapting our instruction, differentiating that, trying to meet the needs of every individual student while maintaining kind of that path forward for all of our students, because we have to get through our course objectives and our learning objectives throughout the school year while we differentiate and meet the needs of all students. So I would say this year is no different from any other year in that regards, is that we will do what we do best, assess our students and adapt to their needs. Obviously, it's going to look different, and we're all going to have to adapt to what that looks like. So our online only students, that's going to look a little differently, but those teachers that are going to be assigned for our online learners are going to have the time to spend with them. And we're building those systems as we speak right now in order to ensure that our online learners are getting a fair and equitable education. If not beyond that, there's some things we can do differently online to make that even better for them. So we're working on that right now, and we've got some really strong plans in place. But again, I think I just circle back to, we're going to have to also do some small groups. We're going to have to do things in a different manner to reach their needs in a different time situation. But this is what we do, and we're going to figure it out. And every school district is in the same spot we are. We're all trying to figure out this new normal. We're all in this together. And I can tell you that North Syracuse works very closely with all of the surrounding districts. Every one of us on this Zoom have had multiple conversations with our counterparts in other districts. And so we're learning what they're doing in different districts, and we can get some good ideas from them. We can share what we're doing. We're all working on the system together, and we're going to get through this. It's going to take some flexibility. We're going to have to adapt that first month of September. We all know going in, we've got great plans ready to go. And I think that when rubber meets the road, we're going to have to adapt those plans, but we're ready for that. We've got contingency plans ready to go. We'll get there. We're going to do that together as a community of teachers, of parents, of our students. It takes all of us, and we'll get there. But we have some really good plans in place, and this is what we do.
Thank you, Mr. Stone. Next question. We have a Chromebook at home that our daughter used for online learning. Will we be able to use that, or will we be receiving one from the school be mandatory? If so, will she need to bring this to school on her days that she has class? Mr. Leahy?
Yeah, that's a great question. And we're going to be providing all of our K-12 students a Chromebook at the start of the school year. It's going to be a critical learning tool this year. Computers have always been important, but particularly this year because students can bring them to and from school. What I would say is students can use their device if they have their own device at home, but we really encourage students to use the school device because it's going to have the programs loaded on it. Students are going to be familiar and competent in using them. And I think that would be the best bet, and they'll be able to transfer those back and forth from school. I would prefer students not bring their own home laptop computer to school, only because that could cause concerns with sharing, access to information, as well as if something were to be broken. We wouldn't want to be responsible for that, particularly when we have a Chromebook for all students. And I think that what most parents would say in looking at the Chromebooks, they're really suited for student needs. They're made for that. They're very durable. We don't have to worry too much about any concerns with breakage. Of all the ones we put out last year, we had a very small percentage of issues with Chromebooks being broken or damaged. We'd prefer the students to use those. And again, at home, if students have a device that has access to Google Classroom and the other platforms, that's great. But we really would want our parents to take advantage of the Chromebooks that are going to be provided, given that they will have an ease of access in terms of logging in and have access to those platforms and programs that our teachers will be using. So we will ask, and what we're going to be doing is looking at, especially our K-4 buildings, is having those Chromebooks stay in the building for the first couple of weeks, get the students acclimated, make sure they're proficient at using them, and then we'll start having them travel home with students and back to school. In our secondary buildings, they'll be going home earlier. Students will be having assigned throughout the year. They'll also be getting chargers, and the expectation will be the students will bring those Chromebooks back to school, charged, ready to go, because they're going to be important learning devices. Now, within that broad guidance, some teachers may use them differently throughout the school year. They may be using them, so you say, hey, take it home. We won't need it for the next couple of days. That's fine. And we don't want to create parameters. We want these to be flexible devices as they're designed to be. But again, students will have the Chromebook assigned to them. I think it would be ideal for parents to work with students in using them. Doesn't mean they can't use other devices at home. That's certainly an option. But I think it'll be the most convenient thing for our students to get acclimated with those devices, use them throughout the year.
Thank you. When will busing assignments be mailed out? Mr. Keegan?
We're going to be mailing our bus letters. Our dispatching team and at transportation has been working hard to do the routing and to make sure that we're building those routes in a manner that allow us to only have one child per seat and 22 children on the bus. And we're going to mail those letters out on August 27th and August 28th, and they should be delivered to homes by August 31st. And we're very fortunate with the way that the instructional side of the house has organized school, in that we'll be bringing only half the children into the elementary schools and a quarter of the kids into time at the secondary level. And as a result of that, we should have ample capacity on our fleet, and there's no need to stagger times at all. So we'll have those bus letters will be out. The hotline's there, as I mentioned earlier, and we welcome any questions or concerns parents have regarding transportation.
Thank you. How will elementary students be receiving teacher instruction and interaction on their virtual days? Will they have small group Zoom with teachers while kids are in person completing independent work? Mr. Stone?
Yeah, so and this is one of the challenges of creating this system. So we've spoke about this a few times, but it definitely needs to be restated of kind of what this looks like for everyone. And I know there's a lot of questions around what virtual is going to look like. So I'll go over just briefly kind of what it is at the elementary level. I talked about this a little bit last night as well. So remember, we've got our 2 cohorts going, and I think everyone's pretty familiar with that model. So we've got our students coming in on that Monday and Tuesday, about half of our students. They're going to be receiving a full elementary schedule. So they're going to be getting their full ELA, math, their science, or their social studies. They're going to be getting their special. We've built in what we call the flex time as well. So teachers can also adapt what's needed right in front of them in that real-time setting. So they're able to adjust some things in there to meet various student needs. So the face-to-face part, I think, is everyone's kind of got a pretty good handle on, and they've got a good understanding of what that's going to look like on those 2 days. It's very similar to a typical day. Then we get into the whole conversation about asynchronous and synchronous. And I'm sure there's a lot of parents that have heard us talk about this several times, but I can tell you, in even working with teachers and other administrators, it definitely warrants going back to and revisiting and kind of really hammering out what that actually means. And it's pretty simple. So synchronous is that time, basically we've kind of defined it as that's an interactive time. That's a time when the teacher and the student or students are interacting. So right now this would not be synchronous because we're unable to interact with students or the audience. But if I were a teacher and I was streaming something right now, or if I was using Zoom, an interactive way could be back and forth right there where you could talk back and forth. When you're face-to-face in the classroom, that's another synchronous example. So anytime there's interaction when both can respond is what the synchronous piece looks like. Asynchronous is basically everything else. And so typically we're using Google Classroom at pretty much all levels is going to be Google Classroom. We heard very clearly from parents that it was important for us to have a very consistent learning management platform. So that Google Classroom is going to house all those other components. And so asynchronous is going to look like, oftentimes it could be a teacher who has recorded a lesson of themselves or a colleague. It could be a lesson that we use from an instructional website that teaches something. It could be an assessment or a quiz. It could be work that is completed in relation to what was taught in class. And sometimes it's new instruction. Oftentimes it's reinforcement instruction, but it's for all of those other components of what happens. And so when you've got those two areas, that kind of helps solidify what that looks like. So the question was, our virtual learners or the remote learners. So again, we've got that first group of students who are going to attend face-to-face. They'll be in school Monday and Tuesday, while the rest of the class is going to get some asynchronous work that's they'll be doing online. And the goal is for our teachers to provide as much feedback as possible, but for us to keep in mind that our teachers are teaching all day. So that's going to be a challenge, but something we're working through. And then when we shift over to Thursday and Friday, it's a reverse. So the students who were getting an asynchronous model or virtual, they're going to get face-to-face, while the other students who had face-to-face are going to get now that asynchronous learning. So then the big question is Wednesday. And at the elementary level, it's going to be a mixture of both. So the students who are in this hybrid model, they are going to get synchronous instruction with teachers in an online setting. And they'll also be getting asynchronous supporting documents or supporting lessons and supporting work that they would do. So that Wednesday is going to be kind of like the double dip day where they get both. And that's for all students that are in hybrid. Finally, our remote learners. And I know this question comes up all the time, and we're doing our absolute best to answer it. I think the biggest challenge we face right now is we have the deadline for parents to choose which model they're going to select. That determines what our staffing is going to be in the different models. So if we get 20% of our students, for example, are going to do a remote learning, we then have to staff that, and we have to adjust all of our staffing in the elementary schools or not all, in all of our schools to appropriately accommodate the face-to-face and the remote. So it makes it challenging for us to give you an exact answer of what that's going to look like until we have those numbers in order to build those classes. But what I can guarantee everyone, and this is K-12, is that whichever model you select, we are building instructional expectations for our students that will match both models. So if you are a fully remote learner, we will ensure that we're matching the pacing and everything else that happens in the face-to-face, as well as what that interaction looks like between teacher and student. So that might help parents a little bit in their decision. I wish we could give a little more detail, but in reality, that is what it's looking like. And regardless of the model selected, one model will not receive more than the other. It's going to be as equitable and equal as we can possibly make it, given all of the constraints that we have.
Thank you. Next question. The students will attend school in a hybrid learning model on days according to their last name. Would a request for different days be honored if it was better for the parent's work schedule? Dr. Leahy?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I kind of touched upon that earlier. For one of the things that we're doing differently this year, because we have to meet our social distancing guidelines, to make sure rooms are clean, to make sure we don't have more than 22 students on the bus, we can take temperatures of all our students before they enter the building, is this is really in some ways a game of numbers. We talk about desks being 6 feet apart, a whole series of things. So what we have to do is we say, hey, so if we can only bring our students in certain days, because we have to shrink our class sizes, there's going to be more space and less students in our classes as well as on the buses. Then the question is, well, how do we divide up the alphabet so we get kids in a predictable way? So what our building administrators did is they actually said, we looked at Mr. Stone and our secondary principals and said, all right, if we did a rough division of the alphabet, we said, let's split it 50-50 with an equal amount of students in the front end and, as well as the back. We ended up with A through K and L through Z. So what happens is if we can maintain that roughly, then we're pretty good. The problem is if most parents say, hey, if 70% of our parents said, I want my child to attend school on Thursday and Friday, but be home on Monday and Tuesday, suddenly all those numbers are off. Suddenly our classrooms are going to be too big to maintain the social distancing guidelines. We're going to have too many students on the bus. We won't be able to manage the cafeterias. So we really have to keep this 50-50 split. And that's hard because, as I mentioned earlier, there are people who say, hey, I have to be at work at certain times. I don't want to have to give up my job, but I feel that strongly about my child's education that I want to be available for them when they're home. And we understand that. So what we're trying to do is say, hey, let's see if we can swap out. So if one parent wants to slide to the other side of the week, we would need another parent to do a similar thing, because there is that balance of once we get off balance, we're not going to be able to do what we are required to do in meeting social distancing guidelines, making sure our classes are staffed with desks that are appropriately spread apart, making sure our buses aren't overloaded, and making sure that we can be successful going into the school year. So with that said, the answer is we want to maintain those two groups, that group A and group B, or cohort A and cohort B. However, we also understand that the way things are designed right now are not ideal for all parents. But they may not be workable either. And if they're not workable, then we want to hear from parents and we'll see what we can do. But at this time, we can't create an imbalance in the system, because we have to keep those classrooms not only staffed, but staffed with, with appropriate teachers and people who are certified. We want to make sure our students are meeting the guidelines, and we don't have too many students in the building, on the buses, in the hallways, in the cafeterias. So again, short answer would be, we're going to try to maintain the way things are divided now. However, if there's an urgent circumstance or there's something that's really pressing, please contact your building principals and we'll do our best to work with you, trying to create a win-win situation for all of our families.
Thank you. That is the last of our questions, and I want to thank all the people that have tuned in to our listening sessions over the last few days. If they've seen all three or they've just tuned into this one, we hope the information was very helpful. And we're trying to answer questions as much as possible. If you still need certain questions answered, please let us know and we'll be happy to answer them for you. I want to again thank you and have a wonderful evening.